The crowd on the pier went silent when she laughed. Not the nervous kind, the cruel kind. Adrian Wolfe, 32 years old, billionaire, single father, was on one knee with a ring that cost more than most people's houses, and Vanessa Hale was laughing at him like he'd just told the world's worst joke. "Marriage?" she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "That's a cage, Adrian. Family life? A boring trap." The fireworks exploded overhead, red and gold against the black sky, but all Adrian heard was the sound of his pride shattering on the wooden planks beneath him. If you want to see how a man rebuilt his life from public humiliation to real love, stay until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. Adrian didn't remember standing up. He didn't remember walking away from Vanessa or the crowd that had gathered to watch what they thought would be a fairy tale proposal. What he remembered was the sound of his own footsteps on the pier, hollow and rhythmic, drowning out the whistles and pops of the fireworks display he'd paid $12,000 to choreograph. Behind him, Vanessa called his name, once, maybe twice. He didn't turn around. The parking lot smelled like fried dough and sunscreen. Families streamed past him, kids with glow sticks and parents with strollers, all of them looking at him with that particular mixture of pity and curiosity reserved for public disasters. His phone buzzed in his pocket, then again, then 5 more times in rapid succession. He pulled it out long enough to see the notifications, texts from his assistant, his brother, 2 business partners, and someone named Jessica, whose last name he couldn't remember but whose number he apparently had. Everyone had seen it. Of course they had. Vanessa had made sure of that. He got in his car, a Mercedes he'd bought 3 months ago and already couldn't remember why, and sat in the driver's seat without starting the engine. Through the windshield, he could still see the edge of the pier, the silhouettes of people watching the finale. Somewhere in that crowd, Vanessa was probably already on to her next thrill, her next audience, her next performance. That's what their relationship had been, he realized. A performance. 2 years of champagne and yacht parties and charity galas, where the charity part was just an excuse to wear expensive clothes and be photographed. His daughter's face appeared in his mind. Lily, 4 years old, asleep right now at his mother's house 20 minutes away, probably curled up with that stuffed elephant she refused to sleep without. What the hell had he been thinking? Adrian started the car and drove. Not to his mother's house, not to his penthouse downtown. He drove to the only place that made sense in that moment, the small house he'd bought 2 years ago in a quiet neighborhood 40 minutes outside the city. The house he'd thought about selling a dozen times because it didn't fit the image. The house Vanessa had visited exactly once and called cute in a tone that meant the opposite. It was almost midnight when he pulled into the driveway. The neighbors' houses were dark except for the occasional porch light. He sat in the car for another 10 minutes, then went inside. The house smelled like the lemon cleaning spray his housekeeper used. Everything was exactly where it had been the last time he'd visited 3 weeks ago. He walked through the living room, the kitchen, the hallway with the 5 photographs he'd hung himself, all of them pictures of Lily at various ages, none of them professional, all of them slightly crooked. He ended up in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed he'd slept in maybe 10 times total. His phone was still buzzing. He turned it off without looking at it. The thing about humiliation, Adrian thought, was that it clarified things, stripped away the noise, made you look at what was actually there instead of what you'd convinced yourself was there. What was there, in his case, was a 40-hour work week that had somehow become 80 hours. A social calendar managed by an assistant who scheduled his life in 15-minute increments. A rotation of restaurants where he knew the owners by name and they knew his drink order, and neither of those facts meant anything. A relationship with a woman who thought commitment was something that happened to other people, boring people, trapped people, people without vision. And Lily. Always Lily. Waiting for him to show up. Waiting for him to be present instead of just there. Waiting for him to build something that looked like a life instead of an itinerary. He'd proposed to Vanessa because some part of him, the part that still remembered who he'd been before the money, before the company, before the investors and the board meetings and the features in business magazines, had wanted to believe he could have both. The empire and the family. The success and the simplicity. The woman who made him feel alive and the stability his daughter needed. But Vanessa had been right about one thing. Marriage would have been a cage. Not for her, for him. He would have spent the rest of his life trying to keep up with someone who was always running toward the next thing, the next adventure, the next crowd to perform for. He lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. Somewhere in the city, fireworks were still going off. He could hear them faintly through the closed windows, distant thunder that meant nothing. By the time the sun came up, he'd made his decision. Adrian called Vanessa at 7 in the morning. She answered on the fourth ring, her voice thick with sleep or maybe something else. Adrian, Jesus, what time is it? We're done, he said. Silence on the other end. Then a laugh, smaller than the one on the pier, but just as sharp. Because I didn't say yes? Come on. You knew what this was. I did, Adrian said. That's the problem. So what? You're going to find some nice girl who wants to play house, bake cookies and carpool, and all that suburban nightmare bullshit? Maybe. You'll be bored in 6 months and... Maybe, Adrian said again, but I'd rather be bored than empty. He hung up before she could respond. Then he turned his phone back off, drove to his mother's house, and picked up his daughter. Lily was eating cereal at the kitchen table when he walked in. She looked up at him with those wide brown eyes that always made his chest tight, milk on her upper lip, and said, "Did Vanessa say yes?" His mother, standing at the counter with a cup of coffee, gave him a look that said she already knew the answer. Adrian sat down next to Lily and wiped the milk off her face with his thumb. "No, sweetheart. She didn't." "Oh." Lily went back to her cereal, apparently unbothered. "Can we go to the park?" "Yeah," Adrian said. We can go to the park." His mother followed him outside when he carried Lily's overnight bag to the car. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm fine." "You don't look fine." Adrian opened the car door and tossed the bag in the back seat. "I proposed to the wrong person for the wrong reasons. Now I'm fixing it." His mother crossed her arms. She was 63, sharp as ever, and had exactly 0 patience for his bullshit. "And what are the right reasons?" "I don't know yet," Adrian admitted, "but I know what they're not." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. That's a start." Bombs. The next 3 months were the quietest of Adrian's adult life. He didn't date, didn't go to parties, didn't accept invitations to galas or benefits or networking events where everyone asked about Vanessa, and he had to smile and say they'd gone their separate ways. Instead, he worked. Not the performative kind of work where the point was to be seen working, but actual work. The kind that required focus and solved problems and moved the needle on things that mattered. His company had been profitable for years. Software solutions for mid-sized businesses. Nothing sexy, nothing revolutionary, just solid technology that worked and made people's lives easier. But the foundation he'd started 2 years ago, the one that was supposed to be a tax write-off and a good PR move, had been sitting in neutral because he'd been too busy with everything else to give it real attention. The mission was simple: bring education resources to underserved communities. Mobile learning labs, essentially retrofitted buses equipped with computers, books, internet access, and tutors that could park in neighborhoods where the schools were underfunded and the kids were falling through the cracks. It had been his brother's idea originally. Marcus, 3 years younger, a high school teacher who made $48,000 a year and somehow seemed happier than anyone Adrian knew. "You've got the money," Marcus had said over beers one night. "Do something with it that isn't another tax shelter." So Adrian had written the checks, hired a small staff, and let them handle it while he focused on the parts of his life that felt more urgent at the time, which, looking back, had mostly been Vanessa and the exhausting work of keeping her entertained. Now, with his calendar suddenly clear, he actually visited the mobile labs. The first one was parked in a neighborhood called Riverside, 40 minutes south of downtown. The houses were small, the yards were chain-link fenced, and the corner store had bars on the windows. Adrian pulled up in his Mercedes, immediately felt ridiculous, and made a mental note to buy something less conspicuous. The lab was a converted school bus painted blue and white with the Foundation's logo on the side. A book with wings, which Adrian had always thought was a little on the nose, but the design team had insisted. Inside, it was cramped but functional. 6 computer stations, shelves of books, a small area with beanbag chairs, and a woman in her early 30s standing at the front explaining fractions to a group of kids who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Adrian stood in the doorway and watched. The woman had dark hair pulled back in a ponytail, jeans with a hole in one knee, and a shirt that said, "Nevertheless, she persisted," in faded letters. She spoke clearly but not condescendingly, like she actually believed the kids could understand what she was teaching instead of just going through the motions. One of the kids, a boy maybe 10 years old, interrupted her. "Miss Clara, this is stupid. When am I ever going to use fractions?" The woman, Clara apparently, didn't miss a beat. "You want to split a pizza evenly with your friends? That's different. It's literally the same thing. Half a pizza, 1/4 of a pizza. That's fractions, Danny." "But nobody talks like that." "They do if they're trying to sound smart at parties." She smiled, and a couple of the kids laughed. "Look, you're right. Most of the time, you won't walk around talking about numerators and denominators, but learning how to think through problems, how to break big things into smaller pieces, how to see patterns, that's useful everywhere. That's the point." The boy didn't look convinced, but he stopped arguing. Clara moved on to the next concept, and Adrian stayed in the doorway, watching. When the session ended 20 minutes later, the kids filed out, loud and chaotic, and Clara started cleaning up. She didn't notice Adrian until she turned around and nearly walked into him. "Jesus," she said, stumbling back. "You scared me." "Sorry, I'm Adrian Wolf. I run the foundation." She blinked. "Oh, right, the guy who signs the checks." She wiped her hands on her jeans, then extended one. "Clara Bennett. I'm one of the tutors." Her handshake was firm, her palm slightly rough. Up close, Adrian could see the tiredness around her eyes, the kind that came from long hours and not enough sleep. "How long have you been doing this?" he asked. "The tutoring?" "About 8 months. Why?" "Just curious. You're good at it." "Thanks." She picked up a stack of papers from one of the desks and tapped them into order. "Is this an inspection? Because if it is, I should probably warn you that the heating system's been acting up, and we've been going through printer paper faster than the budget allows. So if you could increase our supply allocation, that'd be great." Adrian almost laughed. "Noted, but no, this isn't an inspection. I just wanted to see the program in action." "Well," Clara gestured around the cramped bus, "this is it. Not glamorous, but it works." "It does." She looked at him like she was trying to figure out whether he was being sincere or just saying what he thought he should say. Apparently, she decided on sincerity because her expression softened slightly. "You want the full tour?" she asked. "It'll take about 3 minutes. This is a bus, not a mansion." Adrian smiled. "Sure." Clara walked him through the setup, showed him the computer stations, explained how they managed scheduling so kids from different grade levels could rotate through, pointed out the bookshelf they'd organized by reading level. She talked quickly, efficiently, like someone used to explaining things to people who didn't have a lot of time. "We've been trying to get permission to park in more neighborhoods," she said, "but the city's slow with approvals. And some areas don't want us because they think we're implying their schools aren't good enough, which, I mean, we kind of are, but you can't say that out loud." "What would help?" Adrian asked. Clara laughed. "Money. Always money. More buses, more staff, more supplies, better outreach so parents know we're here. Maybe some kind of partnership with the schools so it doesn't feel like we're competing with them." She paused. "But honestly, the biggest thing would be consistency. Kids need to know we're going to be here. Same time, same place, every week. The second we become unreliable, we lose them." Adrian pulled out his phone and made a note. "Okay." "Okay, what?" "Okay. I'll work on it." Clara stared at him. "Just like that?" "Just like that." She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You're serious." "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because most rich guys who start foundations do it for the tax break and the photo op. Not because they actually care." Adrian slipped his phone back into his pocket. "I'm not most rich guys." "We'll see," Clara said, but she was smiling when she said it. Adrian started visiting the mobile labs every week, sometimes twice a week. He told himself it was because he needed to understand the program better if he was going to expand it, which was true. But it was also true that the work felt different than anything else he'd been doing. It felt real. Clara was at most of the sessions he attended. She worked 3 days a week at the foundation and picked up shifts at a grocery store the other 4 days to make rent. She lived in a 1-bedroom apartment with her younger brother, a high school senior who was trying to get a scholarship to college. Her parents had died in a car accident when she was 22, and she'd been raising her brother ever since. Adrian learned all of this over the course of several weeks, in fragments, during the moments between tutoring sessions when Clara would answer his questions without making it sound like a sob story. "Why teaching?" he asked once. They were sitting in the bus after hours, waiting for a repair guy to show up and fix the heating system. Clara had her feet propped up on one of the desks, a notebook in her lap where she was sketching out lesson plans. "Because it's the only thing that actually changes anything," she said, without looking up. "You can throw money at poverty all day long, but if you don't give people the tools to climb out of it themselves, nothing sticks. Education sticks." That's optimistic. That's realistic. She glanced at him. "You think I'm naive?" "I think you believe in something." "And you don't?" Adrian considered that. "I believe in systems, structures, things you can measure and predict." "That's sad." "It's practical." Clara went back to her notebook. "You can be both, you know. Practical and hopeful. They're not mutually exclusive." The repair guy showed up before Adrian could respond, but the conversation stuck with him. It was mid-October when Adrian invited Clara to his office downtown. He'd been working on a proposal to expand the mobile lab program, more buses, more neighborhoods, partnerships with local schools and community centers, and he wanted her input before presenting it to the board. Clara showed up 20 minutes late, slightly out of breath, still wearing her grocery store uniform. "Sorry," she said, dropping into the chair across from his desk. "My shift ran long, and then the train was delayed, and I didn't have time to change." "It's fine." Adrian slid a folder across the desk. "Here's what I'm thinking." She opened the folder and started reading. Adrian watched her face as she scanned the pages, watched the way her eyebrows pulled together when she was concentrating, the way she chewed on her lower lip when she found something she disagreed with. "This is ambitious," she said finally. "Too ambitious?" "No, just ambitious." She looked up at him. "You really think the board will approve this?" "If I present it the right way, yes." "And what's the right way?" "Show them the impact, the data, the return on investment." Clara set the folder down. "You can't measure everything in ROI, Adrian." "You can if you want people to fund it." She shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're such a businessman." "That's not an insult, is it?" "It's an observation." They spent the next hour going through the proposal line by line. Clara pushed back on some of his assumptions, suggested changes, pointed out gaps he hadn't considered. She was smart, sharper than half the people he paid 6 figures to advise him, and she didn't soften her opinions to make him feel better. By the time they finished, it was almost 8. The office was mostly empty, just the hum of the HVAC system and the distant sound of a cleaning crew vacuuming somewhere on another floor. "You hungry?" Adrian asked. Clara hesitated. "I should get home. My brother's probably wondering where I am." "Text him. Tell him you're working." Adrian stood up and grabbed his jacket. "Come on, my treat." They ended up at a diner 2 blocks from his office, the kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and a laminated menu that hadn't changed in 20 years. Clara ordered a burger and fries. Adrian ordered coffee and a slice of pie he didn't eat. "You do this a lot?" Clara asked, biting into her burger. "Eat at diners? Take your employees to dinner." "You're not my employee, you're a contractor." "Same thing." "Not really." Clara rolled her eyes. "Okay, fine. Do you take your contractors to dinner a lot?" "No," Adrian admitted. "You're the first." "Should I be flattered or concerned?" "Flattered. Definitely flattered." She laughed, and something in Adrian's chest loosened. He hadn't realized how tense he'd been until that moment. They talked for another hour, about the foundation, about her brother, about the neighborhood where she grew up and the neighborhood where she lived now. She asked him questions too, careful ones at first, then bolder. Why did he start the company? What made him want to do the foundation? Did he actually care about the work, or was it just something to fill the time? "I care," Adrian said. "About what?" "All of it, the work, the impact, making something that lasts." Clara studied him over the rim of her water glass. "What about the other stuff?" "What other stuff?" "The stuff that makes you happy, not successful." "Happy." Adrian didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but he wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. When they left the diner, it was raining. Not hard, just a steady drizzle that made the streetlights look like smudges of gold against the pavement. Adrian offered Clara a ride home, but she said she preferred the train. "Why?" he asked. "Because if I get into your fancy car, I'm going to start thinking of you as the guy with the fancy car instead of the guy who's actually trying to do something good. Can I be both?" "Sure, but I like the second version better." She walked away before he could respond, her hands shoved in her jacket pockets, her breath visible in the cold air. Adrian stood there for a long time, watching her disappear into the crowd, the rain soaking through his jacket, and thought about what happiness might actually look like. Worse. The board approved the expansion in November. Adrian didn't tell Clara until after the vote, and when he did, she hugged him without thinking, then immediately pulled back, embarrassed. "Sorry," she said. "That was unprofessional. It's fine. This is huge. You know that, right? This is going to change things for a lot of kids." "I know." She was still standing close enough that he could smell the faint scent of her shampoo, something floral, something simple. He wanted to hug her back. He wanted to do more than hug her, but he didn't, because he was tired of rushing into things he hadn't thought through. Instead, he said, "We should celebrate." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Dinner. Somewhere nicer than a diner." Clara raised an eyebrow. "Is this a date?" Adrian hesitated. "Do you want it to be?" "I don't know. Do you?" "Yes." She smiled, slow and genuine. "Okay then. It's a date." They went to a small Italian place the following weekend. Clara wore a dress Adrian had never seen before, dark green, simple, nothing expensive, but it fit her perfectly. They sat in a corner booth and talked for 3 hours, and Adrian realized somewhere around the second hour that he hadn't thought about Vanessa once in weeks. When he drove Clara home that night, he walked her to her door even though she said he didn't have to. "Thanks," she said, unlocking the apartment. "For dinner. For everything." "You're welcome." She kissed him on the cheek, quick and light, then slipped inside before he could say anything else. Adrian stood in the hallway for a moment, then walked back to his car, feeling like a teenager and not minding it at all. By December, they were seeing each other regularly. Not officially, not in the way that required announcements or labels, but in the way that mattered. Coffee before work, dinner after, late-night phone calls when Clara couldn't sleep because she was worried about her brother's college applications or the foundation's budget or the heating system in the bus breaking down again. Adrian introduced her to Lily 2 weeks before Christmas. He'd been nervous about it, more nervous than he'd been about anything in years, but Clara had been gentle and natural with his daughter, asking her about school and her favorite books and whether she liked dinosaurs or unicorns better. "Both," Lily had said solemnly, "but dinosaurs are cooler." "I agree," Clara had said. "Unicorns are overrated." Lily had beamed, and Adrian had felt something settle in his chest that he hadn't known was unsettled. On Christmas Eve, Clara came to his house, the small one, not the penthouse, with her brother in tow. The 4 of them ate takeout Chinese food and watched a movie Lily picked, and when Lily fell asleep on the couch halfway through, Clara carried her upstairs without being asked. Adrian found her later in Lily's room, adjusting the blankets, the nightlight casting soft shadows across the walls. "You're good with her," he said quietly. Clara smiled. "She's easy to be good with." Still. They stood there for a moment, watching Lily sleep, and Adrian thought about all the ways his life had changed in the past 6 months. How quiet it was now. How full. Downstairs, Clara's brother was scrolling through his phone, half asleep on the couch. Adrian and Clara sat in the kitchen, drinking tea, talking about nothing important, and Adrian realized he didn't want the night to end. "Can I ask you something?" Clara said eventually. "Anything. Do you ever think about what would have happened if she'd said yes?" Adrian didn't have to ask who she meant. "Sometimes. And I'm glad she didn't." Clara looked at him, her expression unreadable. "Why?" "Because I would have spent the rest of my life trying to be someone I'm not, and I wouldn't have met you." She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she reached across the table and took his hand, her fingers warm against his. "I'm glad too," she said. They sat like that until her brother wandered into the kitchen, rubbing his eyes and asking if it was time to go home yet. Adrian drove them back to their apartment, and when Clara kissed him goodnight, really kissed him, not just a peck on the cheek, it felt like the beginning of something he'd been looking for without knowing it. New Year's came and went. The foundation expanded to 3 more neighborhoods. Clara quit her job at the grocery store to work full-time with the program. Her brother got accepted to college with a partial scholarship. Adrian's company hit record profits, and he barely noticed because he was too busy helping Clara plan curriculum and negotiate with school districts and fix broken equipment. They fought sometimes, about money, about priorities, about the fact that Adrian wanted to throw resources at problems, and Clara wanted to build solutions from the ground up. But they figured it out, because neither of them was interested in walking away. In March, Clara met Adrian's mother. They got along immediately, which Adrian had known they would, but was still relieved to confirm. His mother pulled him aside while Clara was in the bathroom and said, "This one's different." "I know. Don't screw it up." "I won't." In April, Adrian brought up the idea of Clara and her brother moving in. Not to the penthouse, to the house. The small one. The one that was starting to feel like home. Clara said she'd think about it. 2 weeks later, she said yes. They moved in over a weekend, and it was chaotic and messy and nothing like the life Adrian had imagined for himself a year ago. But it was better. It was real. One night in May, they were assembling furniture in the living room. A bookshelf Clara had insisted on buying, even though Adrian had pointed out they already had 3. When she said, out of nowhere, "Do you want more kids?" Adrian looked up from the instruction manual. "What?" "Kids. Do you want more?" "With me, I mean." "Eventually." He set down the screwdriver. "Are you asking because you want them, or because you're trying to figure out if I want them?" "Both." "Then yes, I want them, if you do." Clara nodded slowly. "Okay. Okay. Okay." They went back to assembling the bookshelf, and Adrian thought about how simple it was, the way she'd asked. No performance, no pressure, just a question and an answer, and the quiet understanding that they were building something together. Later that night, after her brother had gone to bed and Lily was asleep upstairs, Adrian and Clara sat on the back porch, the air warm and thick with the smell of cut grass. "I'm going to ask you to marry me," Adrian said. Clara turned to look at him. "When?" "Soon, but I wanted to tell you first, so it's not a surprise." "You're telling me you're going to propose before you propose?" "Yes," she laughed. "That's very you." "Is that okay?" "It's perfect." He kissed her then, slow and unhurried, and thought about fireworks and how they were beautiful, but they didn't last. This, what he had with Clara, would last. He was sure of it. 3 months later, in his backyard, with Lily holding the ring box and Clara's brother standing off to the side trying not to cry, Adrian asked Clara to marry him. She said yes. There were no fireworks, no crowd, just family, string lights hung between the trees, and the absolute certainty that he'd finally gotten it right. The wedding happened in September, small and deliberate, in the backyard of the house that had become theirs. 60 people. A tent, in case it rained. Clara's brother walked her down the aisle between 2 rows of mismatched chairs they'd borrowed from the community center. Lily was the flower girl and took the job so seriously she counted each petal as she dropped it, which meant the ceremony started 15 minutes late and nobody cared. Adrian's mother cried. Clara's brother cried. Even Marcus, Adrian's brother, got a little misty during the vows, though he denied it later. Vanessa didn't come. Adrian hadn't invited her. He'd thought about it for approximately 10 seconds, decided it would be performative and weird, and moved on. She sent a card anyway, unsigned, with a generic congratulations message printed inside. Clara found it mixed in with the other cards and held it up. "Is this from her?" she asked. Adrian glanced at it. "Probably." "You okay?" "I'm fine." Clara tossed the card in the recycling bin without another word, and that was the end of it. The reception was loud and chaotic. Someone's kid knocked over a chair. The caterer ran out of wine halfway through dinner, and Adrian's assistant had to make an emergency run to the liquor store. The DJ played 3 songs in a row that nobody had requested, and when Adrian asked him to switch to something else, the guy looked offended and said he was reading the room. "The room wants something we can actually dance to," Clara said, leaning over Adrian's shoulder. The DJ, clearly not interested in arguing with the bride, switched to an old Motown track, and Clara pulled Adrian onto the makeshift dance floor they'd set up on the lawn. Adrian wasn't a good dancer. He knew this. Clara knew this. Everyone watching knew this. But Clara didn't care, and after a while, neither did he. They swayed and turned and stepped on each other's feet, and it was perfect in the way things are perfect when you stop trying to control them. Later, when most of the guests had left and Lily had fallen asleep on a pile of coats inside the house, Adrian and Clara sat on the porch steps, her head on his shoulder, his jacket draped over her bare arms. "This was good," Clara said quietly. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She tilted her head to look at him. "You happy?" "Very." "Me too." They sat there until Clara's brother came outside and told them people were waiting to say goodbye. Adrian helped Clara to her feet, and they walked back into the noise and the warmth, hand in hand. And Adrian thought about how far he'd come from that night on the pier, how different his life looked now, how much better it felt. The honeymoon was a weekend trip to a cabin 2 hours north. They'd talked about going somewhere farther, Europe, maybe, or the Caribbean, but Clara's brother had classes and Lily had school, and neither of them wanted to be gone long. So they drove up the coast, stayed in a cabin with no Wi-Fi and spotty cell service, and spent 3 days doing nothing. It was the best weekend Adrian had in years. When they got back, real life reasserted itself quickly. Clara's brother was stressed about his classes. Lily came down with a cold that turned into an ear infection. The Foundation's newest mobile lab broke down in a neighborhood 40 minutes away and had to be towed. Adrian's company was in the middle of a product launch that was supposed to be straightforward, but turned into a bureaucratic nightmare involving lawyers and contractors, and a vendor who kept missing deadlines. By mid-October, Adrian was working 60-hour weeks again. He tried not to. He'd promised himself he wouldn't fall back into old patterns. But there were meetings he couldn't skip and problems he couldn't delegate, and a voice in the back of his head that said if he didn't handle it personally, it wouldn't get done right. Clara noticed. Of course she noticed. "You're doing it again," she said one night. Adrian looked up from his laptop. They were in the living room. Clara was grading papers on the couch. Lily was asleep upstairs. Clara's brother was at the library studying for midterms. "Doing what?" Adrian asked. "Working like the world's going to end if you stop." "I'm not." "You are." Clara set her pen down. "You've been home for 2 hours and you haven't looked up from that screen once. There's a lot going on right now." "There's always a lot going on." Adrian closed the laptop. "What do you want me to do? Ignore it?" "I want you to set boundaries. That's what I want." "I have boundaries." Clara gave him a look that said she didn't believe him. "When's the last time you left work at a reasonable hour?" Adrian didn't answer because he couldn't remember. "That's what I thought," Clara said. She picked up her pen and went back to grading, and the conversation was over, but the tension lingered. They didn't fight about it. Clara wasn't the type to push when someone wasn't ready to hear it, but Adrian could feel the weight of it, the unspoken frustration, and it sat in his chest like a stone. 2 weeks later, the foundation held its first annual fundraiser. It was Clara's idea, a way to raise money and awareness, get donors involved, show the community what the program was actually doing. Adrian had been skeptical at first. Fundraisers felt performative, the kind of thing Vanessa would have loved and he would have tolerated. But Clara had insisted, so he'd signed off on it. The event was held at a hotel downtown. 200 people showed up. There were speeches and a silent auction and a video montage of kids from the program talking about what the mobile labs meant to them. Clara gave a speech that was funny and heartfelt and made half the room cry. Adrian gave a speech that was shorter and more focused on data, but people clapped anyway. By the end of the night, they'd raised almost $300,000. Adrian found Clara near the bar afterward, talking to a donor who wanted to fund a new lab in his neighborhood. She looked tired but happy, her hair falling out of the pins she'd used to hold it up, her heels abandoned somewhere under a table. "You did good," Adrian said when the donor finally left. Clara smiled. "We did good. You did most of it. Team effort." She leaned into him and Adrian wrapped an arm around her waist, and for a moment everything felt manageable again. But manageable didn't last. In November, Clara's brother got sick. Not seriously at first, just a bad cold that wouldn't go away. He pushed through it for 2 weeks, going to classes, working his part-time job, insisting he was fine. Then he collapsed in the middle of a lecture hall and ended up in the emergency room. Pneumonia. The doctor said he'd been ignoring symptoms for too long, that his body had finally given out, that he needed to rest and take the antibiotics they prescribed and stop acting like he was invincible. Clara took a week off work to stay with him. Adrian offered to help, but she said she had it handled. He believed her until he came home one night and found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a stack of medical bills. "How bad is it?" Adrian asked. Clara didn't look up. "Bad." "Let me take care of it." "No." Clara say, "I said no." She finally looked at him, her expression hard. "This isn't your problem. You're my wife. That makes it my problem. He's my brother. And I have the money to fix this, so let me." Clara shook her head. "I'm not a charity case, Adrian." "I never said you were. But that's how it feels." She stood up, the chair scraping against the floor. "You swoop in and throw money at everything, and it's supposed to make it better, but it doesn't. It just makes me feel like I can't handle my own life." Adrian stared at her. "That's not what I'm doing." "Isn't it?" "No, I'm trying to help." "I don't need help. I need—" She stopped, her jaw tight. "I don't know. I need to figure this out on my own." "Why? What does that prove?" "That I'm not with you because of your money." The words landed like a punch. Adrian took a step back, his hands falling to his sides. "You think that's why you're here?" he asked quietly. Clara's expression softened, but she didn't take it back. "I don't know. Sometimes I wonder." "Then you don't know me at all." He walked out before she could respond. Not out of the house, just out of the kitchen, into the den where he closed the door and sat on the couch and tried to figure out how they'd gotten here. They didn't talk about it that night. Clara slept in their bedroom. Adrian slept on the couch. In the morning, she was gone before he woke up, already at the hospital with her brother. The fight, or whatever it was, hung over them for days. They were polite to each other, functional, the way you are with a coworker you don't particularly like but have to get along with. Lily noticed and asked if they were mad at each other. Adrian said no. Clara said they were just tired. Neither answer was entirely true. It was Marcus who finally called Adrian out on it. They were having lunch at a sandwich shop near Adrian's office. Marcus had driven into the city for a meeting with his principal and suggested they meet up. Adrian had agreed, grateful for the distraction. "You look like hell," Marcus said, biting into his sandwich. "Thanks." "What's going on?" Adrian picked at his food. "Claire and I had a fight." "About what?" "Money. Her brother's medical bills. She won't let me help." Marcus nodded slowly. "And you don't understand why?" "No, I don't. I have the money. She needs the money. It's not complicated." "It is to her." Adrian looked up. "Why?" "Because she spent the last 8 years taking care of herself and her brother without anyone's help. That's her identity. You coming in and fixing everything with a checkbook undermines that." "That's ridiculous." "Is it?" Marcus took another bite, chewed, swallowed. "Think about it from her perspective. She's been independent her whole adult life. Then she marries you and suddenly you're trying to solve all her problems. How's that supposed to make her feel? Like I care about her? Like she's a project." Adrian set his sandwich down. "I don't think of her as a project. I know you don't. But she doesn't know that. Not when you're throwing money at things without asking if that's what she actually wants." Adrian leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. "So what am I supposed to do? Just let her struggle?" "No, you're supposed to ask her what she needs instead of assuming you know." It was simple advice, obvious even, but Adrian hadn't done it. That night he came home early. Clara was in the kitchen making dinner. Lily was at the table drawing. Clara's brother was upstairs resting. The house smelled like garlic and something tomato-based. "Can we talk?" Adrian asked. Clara glanced at him, then at Lily. "After dinner." "Okay." They ate in near silence. Lily filled the gaps with a long story about something that happened at school involving a hamster and a fire drill. Adrian barely heard it. Clara nodded at the right moments, but her mind was clearly somewhere else. After dinner, Clara sent Lily upstairs to play and turned to Adrian. "What do you want to talk about?" she asked. "The fight, the money, all of it." Clara crossed her arms. "Okay." Adrian took a breath. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have pushed, I should have asked what you needed instead of assuming. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I'm sorry too. I shouldn't have said that thing about not knowing why I'm with you. That wasn't fair. Was it true? No. She looked at him, her eyes steady. I'm with you because I love you. Not because of your money, but sometimes it's hard to separate the two when you keep using money to fix things. I'm not trying to fix you. I know, but it feels like it sometimes. Adrian nodded. So what do you need from me? Clara thought about it. I need you to let me handle some things on my own, even if it's hard, even if you could make it easier. I need to know I can still do that. Okay. Okay? Okay. I'll back off. She studied him, then walked over and wrapped her arms around him. Adrian held her, his chin resting on the top of her head, and thought about how marriage was harder than he'd expected. Not bad, just harder, because it required listening and adjusting and not assuming you had all the answers. Clara pulled back slightly. For what it's worth, I might need help with the bills. Adrian smiled. Yeah? Yeah, but I want to pay you back. You don't have to. I want to, Clara interrupted. It's important to me. Okay, we'll figure it out. They stood there for another moment, holding each other in the kitchen, and Adrian thought about how they were learning to do this, to be married, to be a team. It wasn't smooth, and it wasn't perfect, but it was real. December came, and with it the end-of-year chaos. The foundation was planning for the new year, which meant budgets and grant applications and meetings with potential donors. Adrian's company was closing out Q4, which meant reports and projections, and the annual board meeting where everyone pretended to care about long-term strategy while really just wanting to know about bonuses. Clara's brother recovered fully and went back to school. The medical bills got paid, half by Adrian, half through a payment plan Clara set up herself. They didn't fight about it again. Lily's kindergarten held a winter concert. All the kids dressed up in red and green and sang off key versions of holiday songs while parents recorded it on their phones. Adrian and Clara sat in the back row, holding hands, and when Lily spotted them in the crowd and waved so enthusiastically she nearly fell off the riser, they both waved back. On Christmas morning, they woke up to Lily jumping on their bed at 6 a.m, demanding they come see what was under the tree. Clara groaned and buried her face in the pillow. Adrian laughed and scooped Lily up and carried her back to her room, promising they'd open presents after breakfast. But I'm not hungry, Lily protested. You will be after you eat. That doesn't make sense. Life doesn't make sense, kid. You'll figure that out eventually. They made pancakes. Clara cooked. Adrian supervised. Lily mostly just got in the way, but was too excited to care. Clara's brother showed up around 8, carrying a bag of gifts he'd wrapped himself. The paper creased and the tape excessive, but the effort genuine. They opened presents in the living room. Lily got too many toys and not enough practical things, which Adrian's mother had warned him about, but he'd ignored. Clara got a necklace Adrian had spent too much money on, and a framed photo of the three of them that Clara's brother had taken at the wedding. Clara's brother got a new laptop because his old one had finally died, and he cried a little when he opened it, which made Clara cry, which made Lily ask why everyone was sad. We're not sad, Clara said, wiping her eyes. We're happy. Then why are you crying? Because sometimes happy looks like sad. Lily frowned, clearly unconvinced, but went back to her toys. Adrian got a watch from Clara, simple and classic, with an engraving on the back that said, "You're late." He laughed when he saw it. Am I? He asked. Always, Clara said, but I love you anyway. That afternoon, they drove to Adrian's mother's house for dinner. The whole family was there. Marcus and his wife, a couple of cousins, Adrian's aunt, who talked too much, and his uncle, who talked too little. It was loud and crowded and overwhelming, and at one point Adrian stepped outside just to breathe. Clara found him on the back porch 10 minutes later. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just needed a minute. She sat down next to him on the steps. Your family's intense. That's one word for it. I like them, though. Yeah? Yeah, they're loud and chaotic, and they ask too many personal questions, but they care. You can tell. Adrian smiled. That's a nice way of putting it. They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun dip lower in the sky, the air cold enough to see their breath. Can I ask you something? Clara said eventually. Always. Do you ever regret it? Marrying me instead of someone like Vanessa? Adrian turned to look at her. Where's this coming from? I don't know. I've just been thinking about it. You could have had someone glamorous and exciting, someone who fit your world better. You fit my world perfectly. You know what I mean. Adrian took her hand. I don't regret it. Not for a second. Vanessa was exciting, sure. But exciting gets exhausting. You're steady. In the best way. You make me feel like I can breathe. Clara smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. I'm boring. You're not boring, you're real. Same thing. It's not. Adrian squeezed her hand. Vanessa was a performance. You're the actual show. And I'll take the actual show every time. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. You're good with words when you want to be. I have my moments. They went back inside a few minutes later, back into the noise and the warmth and the chaos of family, and Adrian realized somewhere between dessert and Lily falling asleep on the couch that this was what he'd been looking for all along. Not perfection, not excitement, just this. The mess and the love and the ordinary magic of people showing up for each other. In January, the foundation launched 2 new mobile labs. The rollout was smoother than Adrian expected, mostly, because Clara had planned every detail down to the minute. She was good at that, seeing the big picture and the small pieces at the same time, making sure nothing fell through the cracks. The new labs were in neighborhoods that had been asking for resources for years. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Parents showed up with their kids. Teachers stopped by to see what the program offered. Local businesses donated supplies. It was everything Adrian had hoped for, and more. Clara was there for both launches, talking to parents, helping kids log into computers, explaining the program to anyone who asked. She looked tired but happy, the kind of tired that comes from work that actually matters. This is good, she said to Adrian during a quiet moment between sessions. It is. We're doing something real here. We are. She smiled, and Adrian felt that same tightness in his chest he'd felt the first time he watched her teach. The sense that he was part of something bigger than himself, something that would last. By February, they'd settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, but functional. Adrian still worked too much sometimes. Clara still pushed herself too hard. They still fought occasionally, about schedules, about priorities, about whose turn it was to deal with Lily's tantrums or her brother's stress about school. But they figured it out. They apologized when they needed to. They gave each other space when the other needed it. They showed up, even when it was hard. One night in late February, they were lying in bed, the house quiet except for the hum of the heater. I think we're doing okay, Clara said. Yeah? Yeah, I mean, it's not perfect, but it's good. Adrian turned to look at her. You sound surprised. I am, a little. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop. What other shoe? I don't know. The part where you realize this isn't what you wanted. The part where it gets boring and you start looking for something more exciting. Adrian propped himself up on one elbow. That's not going to happen. You don't know that. I do. He kissed her forehead. You're it for me, Clara. I'm not going anywhere. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Okay. Okay? Okay, I believe you. They fell asleep like that, tangled together, and Adrian thought about how trust was something you built over time, not with grand gestures, but with small moments, with showing up, with staying. In March, Vanessa's name appeared in the news. Adrian saw it on his phone during a meeting and almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of him. The article was about a gallery opening in the city. Vanessa was quoted talking about the artist and the work and how important it was to support emerging talent. There was a photo of her in a black dress, smiling at the camera, looking exactly like she always had, polished, confident, untouchable. Adrian stared at the photo for a moment, then closed the article and put his phone away. That night, he told Clara about it. How do you feel? She asked. Adrian thought about it. Nothing, really. It's like looking at a stranger. That's good. Is it? Yeah, it means you've moved on. Adrian nodded. I have. Clara kissed him, and they didn't talk about Vanessa again. By April, the foundation had expanded to 6 neighborhoods. The waiting list for tutoring sessions was months long. Clara hired 2 more staff members and started training volunteers. Adrian secured additional funding from donors who'd been at the fundraiser and wanted to stay involved. It was working. All of it. The foundation, the marriage, the life they were building together. One afternoon, Clara came home and found Adrian assembling a crib in the spare bedroom. "What are you doing?" she asked. Adrian looked up. "Building a crib?" "I can see that. Why?" "Because we're going to need one." Clara stared at him. "Adrian, I know we said we'd wait, but I've been thinking and I don't want to wait anymore. I want this. With you. Now." Clara crossed her arms. "You can't just decide that on your own." "I'm not deciding on my own. I'm asking." "By building a crib?" "By starting the conversation." Clara shook her head, but she was smiling. "You're ridiculous." "Is that a yes?" "It's a maybe, a strong maybe." Adrian grinned. "I'll take it." They talked about it over the next few weeks, not in one big conversation, but in fragments. Over dinner, during walks, late at night when they couldn't sleep. Clara had concerns about money, about time, about whether they were ready. Adrian had concerns too, but his were different. He wanted to make sure Clara wanted this for herself, not just because he did. In the end, they decided to try. Not with pressure or timelines, just with the understanding that if it happened, it happened. And in early June, it happened. Clara took the test on a Saturday morning while Adrian was making breakfast. She came downstairs 10 minutes later, holding the stick, her face unreadable. "Well?" Adrian asked. Clara handed him the test. 2 lines. Adrian stared at it, then at her, then back at the test. "We're pregnant," Clara said. "We're pregnant," Adrian repeated. "Can't." They stood there in the kitchen, the eggs burning on the stove, the test still in Adrian's hand, and then Clara started crying and Adrian started laughing, and they held each other while the smoke alarm went off and Lily yelled from upstairs, asking what was burning. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly right. The first trimester was brutal. Clara spent most mornings hunched over the toilet, while Adrian held her hair back and tried not to look as worried as he felt. She couldn't keep down coffee, couldn't stand the smell of chicken, and cried during a commercial about a dog finding its way home. "This is hormones," she said, wiping her eyes. "I know it's hormones, but I can't stop." Adrian handed her a tissue. "You don't have to stop." "I'm being ridiculous." "You're pregnant. You're allowed to be ridiculous." Lily took the news better than Adrian expected. She'd asked for a baby brother or sister approximately 600 times over the past year, so when they finally told her, she screamed loud enough that the neighbors probably heard. "When?" she demanded. "January," Clara said. "Maybe February. That's forever. It's 7 months." Lily frowned, clearly doing math in her head that didn't add up. "Can I name it?" "We'll talk about it," Adrian said, which was code for absolutely not, but he wasn't ready to have that fight yet. Clara's brother was happy for them, but also visibly terrified, which made sense given that he was 20 years old, and the idea of a baby probably sounded like a nightmare. He gave Clara an awkward hug and told Adrian congratulations, and then excused himself to go study, which Adrian suspected was code for panic in private. By July, Clara was showing. Not a lot, just enough that her jeans didn't fit right, and she started wearing Adrian's shirts around the house. She hated it at first, the physical proof that her body wasn't entirely hers anymore, but eventually she made peace with it in the way you make peace with things you can't control. The foundation kept growing. They added another mobile lab in August, this one funded entirely by a donor who'd seen the program featured in a local news segment. Clara wanted to be at the launch, but Adrian convinced her to stay home after she nearly passed out from heat exhaustion during a planning meeting. "I'm fine," she'd insisted. "You're not fine. You're pregnant and exhausted and it's 95 degrees outside." "I can handle it." "I know you can, but you don't have to." She'd glared at him, but she'd stayed home. Adrian went to the launch alone, cut the ribbon, gave a short speech about community and opportunity, and thought about Clara the entire time. About how much of this program was hers. About how she'd built it from the ground up while he'd just written checks. He told her that when he got home. "You did more than write checks," Clara said. She was lying on the couch with her feet propped up, a book open on her stomach. "Not really. You believed in it. That matters. You made it real." Clara smiled. "Team effort, remember?" Adrian sat down next to her and put his hand on her stomach. "How's the baby?" "Kicking a lot." "Can I feel?" "Give it a minute." They sat there in silence. Adrian's hand warm against her shirt, waiting. And then he felt it, a small, distinct push against his palm. Was that? Yeah, Claire said. That was it. Adrian felt something crack open in his chest, something he didn't have words for. He'd been through this before with Lily, but somehow it felt different this time. Maybe because he was older, maybe because he was more present, maybe because he'd learned that nothing about parenthood was guaranteed, and every small moment like this was a gift. You're going to be a dad again, Clara said quietly. I know. Scared. Terrified. She laughed. Me too. They stayed like that for a long time. Adrian's hand on her stomach, the baby moving beneath it, and Adrian thought about how much his life had changed in 2 years, how unrecognizable it was from the life he'd been living when he proposed to Vanessa on that pier, how much better it was now, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. In September, they found out they were having a boy. Lily immediately started lobbying to name him something ridiculous like Dragonfire or Captain. Clara vetoed both. They settled on James after Clara's father, with the understanding that Lily could pick the middle name as long as it wasn't completely insane. She picked Alexander, which was surprisingly normal, and when Adrian asked why, she said it sounded like a king's name. Fair enough, Adrian said. By October, Clara was too pregnant to do much of anything. She still went to the foundation 3 days a week, but she mostly sat at a desk and directed other people instead of doing the physical work herself. She hated it. Adrian could tell she hated it, but she didn't complain, which somehow made it worse. You don't have to keep going in, Adrian said one night. They were in bed, Clara propped up on about 17 pillows because lying flat made her feel like she couldn't breathe. I want to, she said. I know, but you don't have to. If I stop now, I'll go crazy sitting at home. So find something else to do. Read, sleep, grow a human. You're already busy. Clara turned to look at him. Are you trying to bench me? I'm trying to keep you from burning out. I'm fine. You fell asleep at your desk yesterday. That was one time. Clara, she sighed. Okay, fine. I'll cut back, but I'm not stopping completely. I'm not asking you to stop completely. Good. Because I wouldn't listen anyway. Adrian smiled. I know. Halloween came and went. Lily dressed up as a vampire and collected enough candy to last until Christmas. Clara handed out candy to trick-or-treaters while sitting in a lawn chair on the porch because standing for more than 10 minutes made her back hurt. Adrian stayed inside with her, occasionally getting up to refill the bowl, and thought about how next year there'd be a baby. How different everything would look. In early November, Clara's brother came home for Thanksgiving break. He looked older somehow, more settled, like college was agreeing with him. He helped Adrian set up extra chairs in the dining room for the dinner they were hosting and asked questions about the baby that made it clear he'd been reading parenting books in secret. You don't have to do that, Clara said when he asked about sleep schedules. I want to help. You're in college. You should be focused on school. I can do both. Clara hugged him, which was awkward because her stomach was in the way, and Adrian saw her wipe her eyes when she pulled back. Thanksgiving dinner was chaos. Adrian's mother brought too much food. Marcus brought his kids, who immediately taught Lily a card game that involved a lot of yelling. Clara's brother spent most of the meal trying to explain his philosophy class to Adrian's uncle, who kept interrupting to say that philosophy was useless. It's not useless, Clara's brother said patiently. It teaches you how to think. You don't need a class to teach you how to think. Apparently, some people do. Adrian kicked him under the table before the conversation could escalate. Clara laughed so hard she had to excuse herself to the bathroom. After dinner, when most of the guests had left and the kitchen was a disaster zone of dirty dishes and leftover containers, Adrian found Clara sitting on the back porch. It was cold out, too cold to be sitting outside without a jacket, but she didn't seem to notice. You okay? Adrian asked, sitting down next to her. Yeah, just needed air. You want me to leave you alone? No, stay. They sat in silence for a while, watching their breath fog in the cold air. I've been thinking, Clara said eventually. About what? About how lucky we are to have this. All of it. Adrian took her hand. We are lucky. I keep waiting for something to go wrong. Nothing's going to go wrong. You don't know that. I don't. Adrian admitted. But worrying about it won't change anything. Clara leaned her head on his shoulder. I hate that you're right. Get used to it. I'm right a lot. She elbowed him, and they both laughed, and the moment passed. December arrived with the kind of cold that made your bones ache. Clara was 9 months pregnant and miserable. Her feet were swollen, her back hurt constantly, and she couldn't sleep for more than 2 hours at a time without having to get up to pee. This is torture, she said one morning. Adrian, who'd been up with her half the night, just nodded. I know. I can't do this for another month. You might not have to. Baby could come early. Or late. Babies come late all the time. Let's think positive. Clara glared at him. If you tell me to think positive one more time, I'm going to lose it. Adrian wisely said nothing. The foundation's holiday party was scheduled for mid-December. Claire insisted on going even though Adrian thought it was a terrible idea. You're 9 months pregnant, he said. I'm aware. What if you go into labor at the party? Then you'll drive me to the hospital. It's not that complicated. Clara, I'm going, Adrian. This is my event. I planned it. I'm not missing it because I'm pregnant. She went. And she didn't go into labor, thank God, but she did have to sit down every 15 minutes, and by the end of the night, she looked ready to murder someone. Told you, Adrian said on the drive home. Shut up. I'm just saying. I know what you're saying, and I'm telling you to shut up. Adrian, shut up. James was born on December 23rd, 3 weeks early, at 2 in the morning. Clara's water broke while they were watching a movie, and Adrian, who prided himself on staying calm under pressure, completely panicked. Okay, he said, standing up so fast he knocked over the bowl of popcorn. Okay, hospital. We need to go to the hospital. Adrian, relax. I am relaxed. You're not. You're freaking out. I'm not freaking out. Clara stood up slowly, holding her stomach. Can you call your mom? Someone needs to stay with Lily. Right, yes, Mom. Adrian pulled out his phone, dropped it, picked it up, and dialed. His mom answered on the second ring. It's time, Adrian said. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Make it 10. Adrian, please. I'll be there in 15. She made it in 12. By the time she arrived, Adrian had the hospital bag in the car, Lily was awake and asking 1,000 questions, and Clara was timing contractions on her phone. You doing okay? Adrian's mom asked Clara. I'm fine. Adrian's the one you should worry about. I'm fine, Adrian said. You look like you're going to throw up. I'm not going to throw up. He didn't throw up, but it was close. The drive to the hospital felt like it took hours, even though it was only 20 minutes. Clara was calm the whole way, breathing through contractions, occasionally squeezing Adrian's hand hard enough to cut off circulation. Adrian, meanwhile, ran 2 red lights and almost rear-ended a truck. Slow down, Clara said. We need to get there. We need to get there alive. Adrian slowed down. They made it to the hospital, got checked in, got moved to a room, and then the waiting started. Labor was long, longer than it had been with Lily. Clara was in pain, the kind of pain that made her grip the bed rails and breathe in short, sharp gasps. Adrian stayed next to her the entire time, holding her hand, getting her ice chips, telling her she was doing great even when she told him to stop talking. I can't do this, she said at one point. You can. I can't. It's too much. You're almost there. You don't know that. I do. She looked at him, her face pale and sweaty, and said, If you're lying to me, I'll never forgive you. I'm not lying. And he wasn't. James was born 40 minutes later at 6:17 in the morning, weighing 7 pounds and screaming loud enough to wake the entire floor. The nurse handed him to Clara, and she cried. Not the loud, messy kind of crying, the quiet kind, the kind that meant something too big for words. Adrian cried too, which he hadn't expected, but there it was. He's perfect, Clara said. He is. You want to hold him? Adrian took James carefully, like he was made of glass, and looked down at his son's tiny, scrunched-up face. He had Clara's nose, Adrian's eyes, and absolutely no idea how much his life was about to change. Hey, buddy, Adrian said quietly. I'm your dad. James stopped crying for exactly 3 seconds, then started up again. Clara laughed. He's not impressed. He will be. Maybe. They stayed in the hospital for 2 days. Adrian barely slept. Clara slept even less. James cried a lot. The nurses came in every few hours to check vitals and offer advice that Adrian forgot immediately. When they finally went home, Lily was waiting at the door, practically vibrating with excitement. "Can I see him?" she asked. "Gently," Adrian said. Lily sat on the couch and Adrian placed James in her arms, keeping his hands close just in case. She stared down at her baby brother with an expression of pure wonder. "He's so small," she said. "You were that small once." "Really?" "Really." Lily looked up at Adrian. "Can I keep him?" Adrian smiled. "He's not going anywhere." The first few weeks were a blur. James cried constantly. Clara was exhausted. Adrian was exhausted. Lily was simultaneously helpful and completely in the way. Clara's brother came home for winter break and helped when he could, but mostly he just looked terrified every time James started screaming. "Is this normal?" he asked one night. "Unfortunately," Clara said. "How do people do this?" "Very carefully." Adrian's mother came over almost every day, bringing food and offering to take James so Clara could sleep. Clara usually said no, then changed her mind an hour later when James wouldn't stop crying. By mid-January, they'd settled into something resembling a routine. James was still waking up every 2 hours at night, but at least they knew to expect it. Clara was healing, slowly, and had started talking about going back to work part-time in a few months. Lily had adjusted to having a baby brother and now treated him like her personal doll, which was simultaneously sweet and concerning. One night, after James had finally fallen asleep and Lily was in bed and the house was quiet for the first time all day, Adrian and Clara collapsed on the couch. "We survived," Clara said. "Barely." "But we did." Adrian put his arm around her. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, sore, happy." She looked at him. "You?" "Same, minus the sore part." Clara laughed. "Must be nice. I'd trade places with you if I could." "Liar." "Okay, maybe not, but I'd think about it." They sat there in the quiet, and Adrian thought about how different this was from the first time. With Lily, he'd been younger, less prepared, still figuring out who he was. He'd loved her fiercely, but he'd also been terrified in a way he couldn't articulate. This time was different. He was still terrified, but it was a different kind of fear. Not the fear of failing, the fear of not being enough, of missing moments, of looking back and realizing he'd been too busy to notice his own life happening. "I want to be present for this," Adrian said. Clara turned to look at him. "You are present. I mean really present, not just physically here, but actually paying attention." "Okay. I'm serious." "I know you are." Clara took his hand. "And I'll hold you to it." "Good." They stayed on the couch until James started crying again, then took turns getting up with him, and Adrian thought about how this was what love actually looked like. Not grand gestures or perfect moments, just showing up, over and over, even when you were tired, even when it was hard. By February, the foundation had started planning a major expansion. They'd secured enough funding to add 5 more mobile labs and hire a full-time coordinator to manage operations. Clara was consulting remotely, video calling into meetings while James napped, offering input on curriculum and outreach strategies. Adrian could tell she missed being there in person, missed the kids and the work and the feeling of making a tangible difference. But she never said it out loud, and Adrian didn't push. One afternoon in late February, a reporter from a national magazine reached out. They wanted to do a feature on the foundation, on the work they were doing in underserved communities. Adrian agreed to the interview, then asked if Clara wanted to be included. "It's your program," he said. "It's our program." "You built it," Clara considered. "Okay, yeah, let's do it." The interview happened in March. The reporter came to the house, met James, talked to Lily, and spent 2 hours asking questions about the foundation's mission and impact. Clara did most of the talking. Adrian added context here and there, but mostly he just watched her, the way she lit up when she talked about the kids and the tutors and the communities they were serving. The magazine wanted photos. They sent a photographer who took 100 shots of Adrian and Clara and Lily and James, both at the house and at one of the mobile labs. In one photo, Adrian was holding James while Clara helped a kid with a math problem. In another, Lily was sitting at a computer with a huge grin on her face. When the issue came out in May, the The photo they used for the cover was the one of all four of them standing in front of the mobile lab. Clara was holding James. Adrian had his arm around Lily. They all looked tired but happy, and the headline read, "Building Futures, How One Family is Changing Education." Adrian bought 3 copies. Clara laughed at him. "Why do you need 3?" she asked. "One for us, one for my mom, one to frame." "You're not framing a magazine cover." "Watch me." He framed it, hung it in his office. And every time he looked at it, he felt something swell in his chest that he couldn't quite name. The article brought attention, a lot of it. Donors reached out. Other cities asked about replicating the program. A couple of foundations wanted to partner. Adrian's phone rang constantly for 2 weeks straight, but the attention also brought something else, something Adrian hadn't expected. 3 days after the magazine hit stands, Vanessa called. Adrian was at his office when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, saw her name, and felt his stomach drop. He stared at it for a long moment, then answered. "Hello?" "Adrian, hi." Vanessa's voice was exactly the same, smooth, confident, like no time had passed at all. "I saw the article. Congratulations." "Thanks." "You look good. Happy." Adrian didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. "I was wondering," Vanessa continued, "if you'd want to grab coffee sometime, catch up." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Why not? We're both adults. We can be civil." "I'm sure we can, but I don't see the point." There was a pause on the other end, then, "I just want to talk, that's all." Adrian sighed. "About what?" "About, I don't know, everything. I've been thinking a lot lately, and seeing that article made me realize I never really apologized for the way things ended, for what I said on the pier." "It's fine, Vanessa. That was years ago." "I know, but still, I'd like to say it in person." Adrian thought about it, thought about telling her no, that he'd moved on, that there was nothing left to say. But some part of him, maybe curiosity, maybe closure, said yes before he could stop himself. "Okay, coffee. That's it." "That's it," Vanessa agreed. "Thank you." They made plans to meet the following week. Adrian hung up and stared at his phone, already regretting the decision. That night, he told Clara. "She wants to meet for coffee," he said. They were in the kitchen. Clara was cleaning bottles. James was asleep in the bouncer on the counter. Lily was upstairs doing homework. Clara didn't look up. "And you said yes?" "I did." "Why?" "I don't know. She said she wanted to apologize." "Do you need her apology?" Adrian thought about it. "No, but maybe she needs to give it." Clara finally looked at him. "Are you sure that's all this is?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you sure she's not trying to get back into your life?" "I'm married, Clara. I have kids. She knows that." Knowing and accepting are 2 different things. Adrian walked over and took the bottle from her hands. "Do you not trust me?" "I trust you. I don't trust her." "It's just coffee." Clara studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, just coffee." But Adrian could see the worry in her eyes, and it stayed with him all week. Adrian met Vanessa at a coffee shop downtown on a Tuesday afternoon. He arrived early, ordered a black coffee he didn't want, and sat at a table near the window where he could see the street. The place was half empty, filled with the kind of people who worked remotely and needed somewhere to sit that wasn't their apartment. Vanessa walked in 10 minutes late, which didn't surprise him. She'd always been late. She spotted him immediately and smiled, that same confident smile he remembered, and walked over like she owned the place. "Adrian," she said, leaning down to kiss his cheek before he could stop her. "You look good." "Thanks. You too." She did look good. She always looked good. Hair perfectly styled, clothes that probably cost more than most people's rent, makeup subtle but deliberate. She sat down across from him and ordered an almond milk latte from the barista, who appeared instantly, like Vanessa had summoned her. "So," Vanessa said once the barista left, "how have you been?" "Good. Busy." "I saw the article, the magazine cover. Very impressive." "Thanks. You have a son now, James, right?" "Yeah, James." "And you're still with Clara?" It wasn't a question, but Adrian answered anyway. "I am." Vanessa nodded slowly, her fingers tracing the edge of the menu even though she'd already ordered. "She seems nice. In the article, I mean, down to earth." "She is." Different from me. Adrian didn't take the bait. Yeah, she is. The barista brought Vanessa's latte. She took a sip, set it down, and looked at Adrian with an expression he couldn't quite read. I wanted to apologize, she said finally, for what happened on the pier, for laughing at you, for saying those things in front of everyone. It's fine. It was a long time ago. It's not fine. I was cruel, and I've regretted it ever since. Adrian studied her face, looking for signs of performance, of the calculated emotion she was so good at. But all he saw was tiredness, the kind that came from carrying something heavy for too long. Why now? He asked. What do you mean? Why apologize now? It's been years. Vanessa looked out the window. Because I saw that photo of you and your family and I realized something. You got everything you wanted. The wife, the kids, the meaningful work. And I'm still, I don't know, chasing something I can't define. You could have those things too. Could I? She looked back at him. I don't know if I'm built for it, Adrian. The settling down part, the ordinary life part. It's not ordinary. You know what I mean. Adrian took a sip of his coffee. It was cold now, bitter. Then why apologize? If you don't regret the choice you made, what are you sorry for? Vanessa was quiet for a moment. I'm sorry for hurting you, for making you feel small. You didn't deserve that. No, I didn't. I was scared, she said quietly. You asking me to marry you meant giving up a version of myself I wasn't ready to let go of. And instead of just saying that, I made you the villain, like you were trying to trap me instead of just loving me. Adrian set his cup down. I did love you. I know. But I loved the idea of you more than the actual you, and you loved the idea of me more than the reality. We were never going to work. Vanessa smiled, sad and small. No, we weren't. They sat in silence for a while. People came and went around them. Someone's phone rang. A chair scraped against the floor. Life continued, indifferent to their conversation. Are you happy? Vanessa asked eventually. Yes. Really happy? Not just content, but actually happy. Adrian thought about Clara, about James sleeping on his chest at 3 a.m, about Lily teaching him card games she made up on the spot, about the chaos and the noise and the beautiful mess of his life. Really happy, he said. Vanessa nodded. Good. I'm glad. What about you? I'm working on it. She finished her latte. I met someone a few months ago. He's a photographer, travels a lot. We're taking it slow. That's good. He asked me to move in with him. And I'm thinking about it, which is progress, I guess. Adrian smiled. It is. They talked for another 20 minutes, small talk mostly, about work and mutual acquaintances and the city changing. It was almost pleasant, almost normal, like they were just two people who used to know each other, catching up over coffee. When Vanessa finally stood to leave, she looked at Adrian for a long moment. Thank you, she said, for meeting me, for listening. You're welcome. And thank you for not hating me. I never hated you, Vanessa. I just moved on. She smiled. I can see that. She left without kissing his cheek this time, just a small wave as she walked out. Adrian watched her go, then sat there for another 10 minutes, finishing his cold coffee and thinking about closure and how strange it was that something that had once felt so important could become so distant. When he got home, Clara was on the floor with James, doing tummy time while Lily read aloud from a book about dinosaurs. She looked up when Adrian walked in. How was it? She asked. Adrian sat down next to her. It was fine. She apologized. We talked. It was fine. Just fine? Yeah, it didn't feel like anything, really, like talking to someone I used to work with. Clara searched his face. And that's okay with you? More than okay. Adrian leaned over and kissed her. I told her I was happy, and I meant it. Clara smiled, and some of the tension Adrian hadn't realized she was carrying seemed to drain away. Good. Lily looked up from her book. Who apologized? Nobody important, Adrian said. Then why did you meet them? Because sometimes you have to let people say what they need to say, even if it doesn't change anything. Lily frowned. That's confusing. Welcome to being an adult, kid. The weeks after that passed in the usual blur of work and diapers and school pickups and foundation meetings. James started sleeping for longer stretches at night, which felt like a miracle. Lily lost her first tooth and put it under her pillow and was devastated when the tooth fairy left her $2 instead of $5. Inflation, Adrian told her. What's inflation? Ask me when you're older. In June, the foundation held its second annual fundraiser. It was bigger this time, 300 people instead of 200, and they raised over $500,000. Clara gave another speech, this one about sustainability and long-term impact, and the crowd gave her a standing ovation. Adrian watched from the side of the room, holding James, and felt that same pride he'd felt at the first fundraiser, the sense that Clara was exactly where she was supposed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. After the event, when they were home and James was asleep and Lily was at a sleepover, Adrian and Clara sat on the back porch with a bottle of wine they were too tired to drink. We did it again, Clara said. We did. I'm exhausted. Me too. But it was worth it. It was. Clara leaned her head on Adrian's shoulder. Sometimes I can't believe this is my life. Good can't believe or bad can't believe? Good. Definitely good. She lifted her head to look at him. Do you ever think about what would have happened if you hadn't ended things with Vanessa? Not really. Liar. Adrian smiled. Okay, sometimes, but only to remind myself how lucky I am that she said no. She didn't say no. She laughed. Even better, saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life. Clara kissed him, slow and soft. You're good at this, you know. At what? Saying the right thing. I have good material to work with. They stayed outside until the mosquitoes got bad, then went inside and fell asleep on the couch watching a movie neither of them cared about. And Adrian thought, somewhere in that hazy space between awake and asleep, that this was enough. More than enough. This was everything. By July, the foundation had expanded to 12 neighborhoods. They'd hired a full-time staff of 15 people. The waiting lists were still long, but they were making progress, chipping away at the need one kid at a time. Clara went back to work 3 days a week, bringing James with her on days when Adrian couldn't work from home. She'd set up a small area in the office with a playpen and toys, and James would nap while she worked, occasionally waking up to remind everyone he existed by screaming. He's got good lungs, one of the tutors said. Tell me about it, Clara replied. Adrian tried to maintain better boundaries with his work schedule. He left the office by 6 most days. Didn't check email after dinner unless it was urgent. Spent weekends with his family instead of catching up on things that could wait until Monday. It wasn't perfect. He still slipped sometimes, still got pulled into meetings that ran long or problems that demanded immediate attention. But he was trying, and Clara noticed. You're doing better, she said one night. They were giving James a bath. Lily was supposedly brushing her teeth but was probably playing with the toothpaste. Yeah? Adrian said. Yeah. You're here more. Not just physically. Actually here, like, I'm trying. I know, and it shows. Adrian lifted James out of the bath and wrapped him in a towel. I don't want to miss this. You're not missing it. I don't want to look back and realize I did. Clara put her hand on his arm. You won't, I promise. In August, Adrian's company hit a major milestone, 10 years in business, revenue that exceeded projections. A product launch that actually went smoothly for once. His board wanted to celebrate with a big event, something showy and expensive that would get press coverage. Adrian said no. Why not? His CFO asked during a meeting. Because we don't need it, Adrian said. Send the money we would have spent on a party to the foundation instead. That's not how this works. It's how I want it to work. The CFO looked at the rest of the board, clearly hoping for backup. Nobody said anything. Fine, the CFO said finally, but you're explaining it to the investors. Adrian did, and most of them didn't care. A few even thought it was a good PR move, which made Adrian want to roll his eyes, but he took the win. Instead of a party, Adrian took his team out for dinner at a nice restaurant. Low-key, casual. Everyone went home by 10, and Adrian felt better about it than he would have about some overproduced event with speeches and awards and people networking instead of actually talking. September brought Lily's first day of second grade. She was nervous, which surprised Adrian because Lily was never nervous. But she stood at the bus stop holding his hand tighter than usual, her backpack almost as big as she was. "What if the other kids don't like me?" she asked. "They'll like you." "How do you know?" "Because you're funny and smart and kind. And if they don't like you, that's their loss." Lily looked up at him. "Do you have to say that because you're my dad?" "No, I say it because it's true." The bus pulled up. Lily hugged him quickly, then ran to get in line. She turned back once before climbing the steps, waved, and Adrian waved back. Clara was waiting at home with James when Adrian got back. "How'd it go?" she asked. "She was nervous. She'll be fine." "I know, but I hate that she was nervous. That's part of growing up, learning to be uncomfortable and doing it anyway." Adrian sat down next to her. "When did you get so wise?" "I've always been wise. You just weren't paying attention." James started fussing, and Clara picked him up, bouncing him gently. Adrian watched them, his wife and his son, and thought about how much had changed in 3 years, how unrecognizable his life was from what it had been. In October, the magazine that had featured the foundation reached out again. They wanted to do a follow-up piece, something about the growth of the program and its impact on the communities it served. Adrian agreed with the condition that they focus on the people doing the actual work instead of him. The reporter came back, interviewed Clara and several of the tutors, talked to parents and kids, and spent a day riding along in one of the mobile labs. The article came out in December, and it was better than the first one. More depth, more stories, more proof that the work mattered. Adrian bought 5 copies this time. Clara still laughed at him. "You're becoming a hoarder," she said. "I'm documenting our legacy." "That's a fancy way of saying hoarder." Christmas was quiet that year. Just immediate family. Adrian's mother, Marcus, and his wife and kids. Clara's brother, who was home from college. They ate too much food and exchanged gifts and watched James try to eat wrapping paper while Lily opened presents for him and narrated what he was supposedly thinking. "He loves this truck," Lily said, holding up a toy James hadn't even looked at. "How do you know?" Adrian asked. "I can tell. We have a special connection." "Right." On Christmas night, after everyone had left and the kids were asleep, Adrian and Clara sat in the living room surrounded by the wreckage of torn paper and discarded bows. "We should clean this up," Clara said. "We should." Neither of them moved. "I'm tired," Clara said. "Me too." "But it was good." "It was." Clara turned to look at Adrian. "I have something to tell you." Adrian's stomach dropped. "What?" "Don't panic. It's good. At least I think it's good." "Clara, you're killing me here." She smiled. "I'm pregnant." Adrian stared at her. "What?" "Pregnant. Again. I took a test this morning." "How? I mean, I know how, but are you serious?" "Very serious." Adrian didn't know what to say. They hadn't been trying. James was barely 6 months old. The foundation was expanding. Clara had just gone back to work. The timing was terrible, but Clara was smiling, and Adrian realized the timing didn't matter. Nothing about his life had followed a plan, and it had all worked out anyway. "How do you feel?" he asked. "Terrified, excited, nauseous." "In that order?" "All at once." Adrian pulled her close. "Okay, we can do this." "You sure?" "No, but we'll figure it out." Clara laughed. "That's becoming our motto." "It's a good motto." They sat there in the mess, holding each other, and Adrian thought about how life kept happening whether you were ready for it or not. The trick was learning to roll with it instead of fighting it. New Year's came and went. Clara's morning sickness was worse this time, which she said was a good sign even though it didn't feel like one. James started crawling, which meant the house had to be baby-proofed all over again. Lily announced she wanted to be a scientist when she grew up, then changed her mind 3 days later and decided on astronaut. By February, Clara was showing again. They told Lily, who was thrilled. They told Clara's brother, who looked like he might faint. They told Adrian's mother, who cried and said she was running out of room for all these grandchildren. "You'll make room," Adrian said. "I will. But you're buying me a bigger house." Deal. In March, Adrian got a call from a reporter at a different magazine. They wanted to interview him about building a successful business while maintaining work-life balance. Adrian almost laughed. "I don't have work-life balance," he told the reporter. Then what do you have? Adrian thought about it. I have priorities, and I try to stick to them most of the time. That's not a great quote. It's an honest one. The interview happened anyway. The article came out in April. It was fine. Adrian didn't buy any copies. By May, the foundation had grown to the point where it needed a new organizational structure. Clara and Adrian spent weeks working with the board to figure out the best way forward. They hired a new executive director, someone with more nonprofit experience than either of them had, and shifted their roles to advisory. This feels weird, Clara said after the first board meeting where they weren't running the show. Good weird or bad weird? I don't know yet. But within a few weeks, it felt right. The new director was good, maybe better than they'd been. The program kept growing, and Clara and Adrian got to focus on the big picture instead of getting lost in the day-to-day details. In June, they found out they were having a girl. Lily was ecstatic. She immediately started planning everything: names, room decorations, which toys the baby would need. "We're naming her Rose," Lily announced at dinner. "We haven't decided on a name yet," Clara said. "Yes, we have. Rose." "Why Rose?" "Because it's pretty, and flowers are nice." Adrian looked at Clara. Clara shrugged. "We'll think about it," Adrian said. "What's there to think about? Rose is perfect." They didn't name her Rose. They named her Emma, after Clara's grandmother. Lily protested for approximately one day, then decided Emma was acceptable as long as her middle name was Rose. "Fine," Clara said. "Emma Rose." "See?" Lily said. "I told you Rose was perfect." Emma was born in September, 2 weeks late, during a thunderstorm that knocked out power to half the city. Clara went into labor at home, and by the time they got to the hospital, she was already dilated to 7 centimeters. "We're not going to make it," she said in the car. "We'll make it." "Adrian, I can feel the baby." "We're not going to make it." They made it. Barely. Emma was born 30 minutes after they arrived, in a delivery room lit by backup generators, with rain hammering against the windows and thunder shaking the building. She came out quiet, which scared Adrian until the nurse said some babies were just like that. And then Emma opened her eyes and looked right at him, and Adrian felt his heart crack open all over again. "Hi, sweetheart," he said. "Welcome to the chaos." Clara laughed, exhausted and crying. That's one way to put it. They brought Emma home 2 days later. Lily was beside herself with excitement. James, now almost a year old, was mostly confused about why there was a new person who cried louder than he did. "This is your sister," Adrian told him. James poked Emma's foot. Emma didn't react. James looked at Adrian like he'd been lied to. The first few months were harder than they'd been with James, not because Emma was difficult, she was actually an easy baby, but because there were now 3 kids and only 2 parents, and the math didn't work. Adrian and Clara were constantly outnumbered. "We're in over our heads," Clara said one night. It was 3 in the morning. Emma was crying. James was crying because Emma was crying. Lily was somehow still asleep. "We've been in over our heads since Lily was born," Adrian said. "We're just used to it now." "This doesn't feel like used to it. Give it time." Clara glared at him. "If you say think positive, I'm leaving you." Adrian wisely said nothing, but they adjusted. Slowly. Adrian's mother helped more. Marcus helped more. Clara's brother, now graduated from college and working his first real job, came over on weekends to give them a break. And eventually, the chaos became the new normal. By the time Emma was 3 months old, Adrian looked around at his life. The 3 kids, the wife he loved more every day, the foundation that was changing lives, the company that was thriving, and realized he didn't recognize any of it. Not in a bad way. In the best way possible. This wasn't the life he'd imagined for himself when he was building his company and dating Vanessa and chasing some vague idea of success. This was better, messier and louder, and infinitely more complicated. But better. One night in December, while Clara fed Emma and Lily helped James build a tower out of blocks that he immediately knocked down, Adrian sat back and just watched. "What are you doing?" Clara asked. "Nothing, just looking." "At what?" "At this." "At all of it." Clara smiled. And I'm really happy." "Good. Me too." Lily's tower fell again. James laughed. Emma stopped eating to look around. And Adrian thought about fireworks and how temporary they were. How bright and beautiful and gone. This, His family, his life, his messy, imperfect, beautiful life wasn't temporary. It was real. It was lasting. And it was enough. The years that followed didn't get easier, exactly. They just got more familiar. The kind of hard you learn to navigate instead of fight against. Emma turned 1, then 2. James became a toddler with opinions about everything and the vocabulary to express exactly none of them, which led to a lot of pointing and frustrated crying. Lily started 3rd grade, then 4th, growing taller and smarter and more sure of herself in ways that made Adrian proud and terrified in equal measure. The foundation kept expanding. By the time Emma was 3, they were operating in 18 neighborhoods across the city and had started licensing the model to other cities. Clara cut back to consulting part-time, mostly because 3 kids under 7 was a full-time job on its own, but she stayed involved in the big decisions, the strategic planning, the parts that mattered most. Adrian's company went through a rough patch in year 12. A competitor launched a product that undercut their prices. 2 key employees left to start their own firm. The board started making noise about pivoting, about innovation, about all the buzzwords that really meant they were nervous. Adrian wasn't nervous. He was tired. Tired of the constant pressure to grow bigger, move faster, chase metrics that didn't actually mean anything. So he made a decision that probably should have been harder than it was. He stepped down as CEO. Not immediately. He spent 6 months finding the right replacement, someone who actually wanted the job and had the energy for it. Then he transitioned to chairman of the board, a role that let him stay involved without drowning in the day-to-day chaos. Clara asked him if he was sure. They were in the kitchen. Emma was finger painting at the table with more paint on her face than the paper. James was building something with blocks that looked structurally unsound. Lily was at school. "I'm sure," Adrian said. "You built that company from nothing." "I know. And now it's something. Someone else can take it from here." "You're not going to miss it?" Adrian thought about that. "I'll miss parts of it, but I won't miss the parts I've been missing here." Clara looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. You're not going to try to talk me out of it?" "Why would I? You clearly already decided." "You could still try." She smiled. "I'm not going to talk you out of doing something that makes you happier." The transition happened in the spring. There was a press release and a couple of interviews and a small party the board insisted on throwing. Adrian shook hands and smiled and said all the right things about new chapters and exciting opportunities. And then it was done, and he went home to his family, and that was that. The extra time changed things. Not dramatically. Adrian still worked, still consulted for the company, still attended board meetings. But he also coached Lily's soccer team that summer, even though he knew nothing about soccer and spent most practices Googling rules on his phone. He took James to the park 3 afternoons a week. He did bedtime with Emma every night, reading the same 5 books on rotation until he could recite them from memory. "You're around a lot more," Lily said one day. They were in the car, driving home from soccer practice. Lily was in the back seat, still in her cleats, covered in grass stains. "Is that good or bad?" Adrian asked. "Good. I like it." "Yeah?" "Yeah. Before you were always busy. Now you're just sometimes busy." Adrian looked at her in the rearview mirror. "I'm sorry I was always busy before." Lily shrugged. "It's okay. You're here now." It was a simple statement, no judgment, just fact. But it hit Adrian harder than it should have, because she was right. He was here now, and that mattered more than all the years he'd been somewhere else. In the fall, the foundation hit a major milestone, 5 years of operation, over 2,000 kids served, measurable improvements in reading scores, graduation rates, college enrollment, the kind of impact that looked good in reports and actually meant something in real life. They celebrated with another fundraiser, bigger than the previous ones, 500 people. Speeches from kids who'd gone through the program and were now in college or starting careers. A video montage that made half the room cry, including Adrian, though he tried to hide it. Clara gave the keynote speech. She talked about community and resilience and the difference between charity and empowerment. She talked about the tutors and volunteers who showed up week after week. She talked about the families who trusted them with their kids. And she talked about what it meant to build something that lasted. "We didn't do this alone," Clara said, looking out at the crowd. "We did it together. And that's the only way it works. Not one person with a checkbook, not one family with good intentions, a community, all of us, showing up, staying committed, believing that education isn't a privilege, it's a right. The applause was thunderous. Adrian watched from the side of the stage, holding Emma while James fidgeted next to him, and Lily stood perfectly still, watching her stepmother like she was memorizing every word. After the event, when they were packing up and heading home, Lily asked Clara a question. "Do you ever get nervous when you talk in front of people?" Clara smiled. "Every single time." "You don't look nervous." "That's the trick. You feel it anyway and do it anyway. Is that what being brave is?" "Yeah, I think so." Lily nodded, processing. "I want to be like you when I grow up." Clara stopped what she was doing and looked at Lily. For a second, Adrian thought she might cry, but she didn't. She just pulled Lily into a hug and said, "You're already like me. You just don't know it yet." That winter was hard for reasons that had nothing to do with the foundation or the company or anything Adrian could control. Clara's brother, who'd been doing well in his job and seemed to have his life together, got into a car accident. Not his fault. Someone ran a red light and T-boned him at an intersection. He survived, but barely. Broken ribs, punctured lung, head trauma that left him in the ICU for 2 weeks. Clara fell apart. Not publicly, not in a way most people would notice, but Adrian saw it. The way she stopped sleeping, the way she forgot to eat, the way she sat next to her brother's hospital bed for hours, holding his hand, willing him to wake up. Adrian took care of the kids, got them to school, made their meals, kept the house running. He called Clara every few hours to check in, brought her coffee and food she didn't touch, sat with her when he could get someone to watch the kids. "He's all I have left," Clara said one night. They were in the hospital cafeteria. It was 2 a.m. Her brother had woken up earlier that day, groggy and confused but awake. "He's going to be okay," Adrian said. "You don't know that." "The doctor said," "I know what the doctor said, but things can still go wrong. People still die." Adrian took her hand. "He's not going to die." Clara looked at him, her eyes red and exhausted. "My parents died, Adrian, in a car accident, just like this. And I wasn't there. I couldn't do anything, and if he dies, he's not going to die. But if he does, then we'll deal with it," Adrian said quietly. "Together. But right now he's alive. He's awake, and you need to sleep." Clara shook her head. "I can't." "Yes, you can. I'll stay with him. If anything changes, I'll wake you." She wanted to argue. Adrian could see it. But she was too tired to fight, so she let him walk her to the small room the hospital had given them. Let him tuck her into the uncomfortable chair that folded out into an even more uncomfortable bed, and let herself fall asleep. Adrian went back to his brother-in-law's room and sat in the chair Clara had been occupying for days. The monitors beeped steadily. The IV dripped. Outside the window, the city was dark except for streetlights and the occasional car passing by. Adrian didn't pray. He'd never been good at that. But he sat there and thought about fragility and luck and how quickly everything could change. How you could build a whole life, solid and real, and one person running a red light could shatter it. But it didn't shatter. Claire's brother recovered. Slowly. He spent 3 weeks in the hospital, then another month in rehab learning how to walk without getting dizzy. He moved back in with Adrian and Clara for a while because he couldn't live alone yet, couldn't drive, couldn't do a lot of things he'd taken for granted. It was cramped. The house wasn't built for 6 people. James and Emma had to share a room. Lily gave up her desk so her uncle had somewhere to work. Everyone was constantly in everyone else's way. But they made it work. Because that's what you did. You adjusted. You figured it out. You made room. By spring, Clara's brother was back on his feet. Not completely healed, the doctors said he'd probably have headaches for the rest of his life. Would need to be careful about contact sports and stress and a dozen other things. But alive. Functional. Himself. He moved out in April into a small apartment 10 minutes away. Clara cried when he left, even though she'd been complaining about the lack of space for weeks. "I'm fine," she said, wiping her eyes. "I'm being ridiculous." "You're not ridiculous," Adrian said. "You almost lost him. You're allowed to be emotional about him leaving." "He's only 10 minutes away." "Doesn't matter. It's still different." Clara leaned into him. "Thank you." "For what?" "For holding everything together when I couldn't." "That's what we do," Adrian said. We take turns falling apart. She laughed, watery and small. Is that marriage? I think so. That summer, the foundation launched a new initiative, college prep courses for high school students who'd gone through the program as kids. It was Clara's idea, a way to close the loop, to make sure the kids who'd gotten help early on had support all the way through. The first cohort was small, 20 students. They met twice a week in one of the mobile labs, working on SAT prep and college essays and financial aid applications. Clara taught some of the sessions herself, even though she had 3 kids at home and a brother who was still recovering. You don't have to do this, Adrian told her. I know, but I want to. Why? Because these kids need to see that someone believes in them, that someone thinks they're worth the effort, and if I can be that person, I will. Adrian looked at her, this woman who'd grown up poor and fought for everything she had and still showed up for other people, and felt something tighten in his chest. You're incredible, he said. Clara smiled. I'm really not. I'm just doing what needs to be done. That's what makes you incredible. By the time Lily started 6th grade, she'd become the kind of kid other kids looked up to. Smart, confident, kind in a way that wasn't performative. She stood up for the weird kids, helped the ones who struggled, made friends with everyone and enemies with no one. Adrian didn't know where she'd learned that. Maybe from Clara. Maybe from watching the foundation's work. Maybe she was just built that way. One day she came home from school upset. What happened? Adrian asked. Lily dropped her backpack on the floor and sat at the kitchen table. There's this girl in my class. Her family just moved here. She doesn't have any friends yet. And some kids were making fun of her at lunch. Did you say something? Yeah, I told them to stop, and then I sat with her. That's good. But now some of the other kids are mad at me. They think I'm being weird. Adrian sat down next to her. Do you care what they think? Lily thought about it. A little. That's normal. But did you think you did the right thing? Yeah. Then that's what matters. Being kind isn't always easy. Sometimes it costs you something, but it's still the right thing to do. Lily nodded slowly. Is that what you and Clara do? With the foundation? Yeah, I guess it is. Then I want to keep doing it too. Adrian pulled her into a hug, and Lily let him, even though she was getting to the age where hugs from parents were supposedly embarrassing. That fall, Adrian got an email that caught him off guard. It was from a journalist working on a long-form piece about second chances and life after public failure. They wanted to interview him about the peer proposal, about Vanessa, about how he'd rebuilt his life after that moment. Adrian almost deleted it, but something made him respond instead. Maybe curiosity, maybe closure, maybe the sense that enough time had passed that it didn't hurt anymore. The interview happened over the phone. The journalist asked good questions, thoughtful ones, about shame and resilience and what it meant to let go of who you thought you were supposed to be. Do you ever regret it? The journalist asked. The way things ended with Vanessa? No, Adrian said. Not even a little. Why not? Because that moment, as terrible as it was, forced me to look at my life honestly. To stop chasing some idea of success that didn't actually make me happy. If she'd said yes, I'd probably be divorced by now. Miserable. Still trying to be someone I'm not. So it was a gift? Adrian thought about that. I wouldn't call it a gift, but it was necessary. Sometimes you need to hit bottom before you figure out what actually matters. The article came out in December. Adrian read it once, thought it was fine, and didn't think about it again. Clara read it 3 times. This is good, she said. It's okay. No, it's really good. You sound wise. Adrian laughed. I'm not wise. You're wiser than you were. That's a low bar. Clara smiled. True, but still. The week before Christmas, Adrian was at the grocery store with James and Emma when he ran into Vanessa. Literally ran into her. They turned the same corner from opposite directions and nearly collided. Adrian, she said, stepping back. Hi. Vanessa. Hey. She looked different. Older, but in a good way. Less polished, more real. She was wearing jeans and a sweater and minimal makeup, and she looked happy. These yours? She asked, gesturing to James and Emma. Yeah, James and Emma. They're beautiful. Thanks. There was an awkward pause. James tugged on Adrian's sleeve, pointing at the candy display. Emma was trying to climb out of the cart. I saw the article, Vanessa said. The one about second chances. Oh, yeah. It was good. You sounded good. Thanks. Another pause. Vanessa shifted her weight, looked like she wanted to say something, then did. I owe you an apology, she said. A real one, not the half-assed version I gave you at the coffee shop. Vanessa, no, let me say this. What I did to you on that pier was cruel. I could have just said no. I could have been kind about it, but I wasn't. I humiliated you in front of everyone because I was scared and selfish, and I took it out on you. And I'm sorry. I'm really, truly sorry. Adrian looked at her, saw the sincerity in her face, the regret. I forgive you, he said. Vanessa blinked. Just like that? Just like that. You apologized 3 years ago. I forgave you then. I just didn't say it out loud. Why not? Because I didn't think you needed to hear it. But maybe you did. Vanessa smiled, small and genuine. Thank you. You're welcome. Emma started to fuss. James was still pointing at the candy. Adrian needed to finish shopping and get home before the kids melted down completely. I should go, he said. Yeah, me too. Vanessa hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I'm happy for you. You got everything you wanted. So did you, it looks like. I'm working on it. I got engaged last month. Congratulations. Thanks. He's good, patient. Doesn't mind that I'm a mess. Adrian smiled. That's all you can ask for. They said goodbye and Adrian continued shopping, and when he got to the checkout line, he realized he wasn't thinking about Vanessa at all. He was thinking about what to make for dinner and whether Clara needed him to pick anything else up, and if they had enough wrapping paper for all the presents they'd bought. Ordinary thoughts. Unremarkable. Perfect. Christmas that year was loud and chaotic, and exactly what Adrian had learned to love. The kids woke up too early. The presents were opened in a frenzy. Lily got a new bike. James got a train set. Emma got approximately 17 stuffed animals because everyone who bought her a gift apparently had the same idea. Clara's brother came over for breakfast. Adrian's mother came for dinner. Marcus and his family stopped by in the afternoon. The house was full of people and noise and laughter, and at one point Adrian stood in the kitchen watching it all and felt Clara come up next to him. You okay? She asked. Yeah, just taking it in. It's a lot. It's perfect. Clara slipped her hand into his. I love you. I love you too, eh? They stood there for a moment, just the two of them in the middle of the chaos, and Adrian thought about everything that had led to this moment. The failures and the false starts, the humiliation and the healing, the slow, hard work of building something real. That night, after the guests had left and the kids were in bed, Adrian and Clara sat on the couch with the lights from the Christmas tree casting soft shadows across the room. Did you see the forecast? Clara asked. No. Why? Fireworks tonight. Some neighborhood display. Adrian listened. Sure enough, he could hear the faint pops and whistles in the distance. You want to watch? Clara asked. Adrian thought about it. Thought about the pier and the proposal and the way those fireworks had lit up the sky while his life fell apart. Thought about how much he'd changed since then. How much everything had changed. No, he said. I'm good right here. Clara smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. Outside, the fireworks continued, bright and loud and temporary. But inside, in the warm glow of the living room, surrounded by the quiet evidence of the life they'd built together, Adrian felt something that would last long after the fireworks faded. He felt at peace. The years kept moving after that. Lily went to middle school, then high school. James started kindergarten, then first grade. Emma grew out of toddlerhood and into a kid with opinions and questions and a stubborn streak a mile wide. The foundation kept expanding. By year 10, they were operating in 30 cities across the country. Clara wrote a book about educational equity that became required reading in graduate programs. Adrian stayed on the board but stepped back from day-to-day operations, letting the next generation of leaders take over. His company was eventually acquired by a larger firm. Adrian made more money than he knew what to do with, so he put most of it into the foundation and into college funds for the kids and into a trust for Clara's brother who was thriving in his career but still struggled with medical bills from the accident. Life wasn't perfect. It never was. They still fought sometimes, still struggled with the balance between work and family, still made mistakes and apologized and tried to do better. But they showed up. every day, for each other, for the kids, for the work that mattered. And that, Adrian learned, was enough. One night, years later, Lily was in college, James was in middle school, Emma was in elementary school. Adrian and Clara were sitting on the same back porch where they'd sat so many times before. "You ever think about how different things could have been?" Clara asked. "Sometimes." "What do you think about?" Adrian considered. "I think about how close I came to settling for the wrong life. How easy it would have been to keep chasing things that looked good but felt empty." "You think you would have been happy? With Vanessa?" "No. I think I would have been successful and miserable. Which is maybe worse than just being miserable." Clara was quiet for a moment. "I'm glad she said no." "Me too. Not because I got you. I mean, that's part of it. But because you deserved better than someone who would laugh at you for wanting a family. We both deserve better than the lives we were settling for." Clara smiled. "Look at us, getting all philosophical. We're old. We're allowed." "We're not old." "Speak for yourself." She elbowed him, and they both laughed, and somewhere in the distance, Adrian heard fireworks, some holiday or celebration he'd lost track of. He didn't get up to look. Didn't need to. He'd learned a long time ago that the best things in life weren't the ones that burned bright and disappeared. They were the ones that built slowly, steadily, over years and years of showing up. The fireworks faded, the night grew quiet, and Adrian sat there with his wife in the house they'd made a home, surrounded by the life they'd built together, and felt a contentment so deep it didn't need words. This was what he'd been looking for all along. Not excitement, not performance, not the rush of something new. Just this. The ordinary magic of loving someone who loved him back, of raising kids who were turning into good humans, of doing work that mattered. Just this. And it was more than enough. It was everything.